Legendary basketball coach Bobby Knight passed away on Wednesday at the age of 83. We're here with a special crossover episode between Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Hoosiers to pay our respects and discuss the life and legacy of Coach Knight. This is Isaac Schade, one of the co-hosts of Locked On College Basketball. I am joined by the brand new host of Locked On Hoosiers, Jacob Goins. And Jacob, we've been intending to get together for a couple weeks, and unfortunate that it's under these circumstances, but honored to get to bring you in this way. And so, folks, for those of you listening and watching, you're here in the exact same episode, whether you're on Locked On Hoosiers or Locked On College Basketball. And so it's an honor for us today to get to talk about Coach Knight, kind of everything from thoughts from coaches around the country to who he was as a person, who he was as a coach, and everything in between. So, Jacob, would you just kick us off to talk a little bit about Coach Knight, the circumstances of his death, what was going on, and just a little bit about his coaching legacy?
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate you bringing me on, and you know, we were talking before. I hate that this is the first time that we're getting together, but it is a massive moment, and when the news broke, it really just shattered my heart. And for all fans of Indiana basketball and all fans of college basketball, which of course is what your show is about. And so Bob Knight was a legend at Indiana, but a legend in the game of college basketball. He passed away at the age of 83 at his home in Bloomington, surrounded by family, which is, you know, that's all you can really ask for when you do lose a loved one, and somebody who was so cherished. And when you look at just what he did for the game of college basketball and for Indiana, has over 900 wins in his total career, puts him at 6th all-time in wins as a head coach. And he has some very memorable moments on and off the floor, with some national championships, some really low seasons. I mean, we've got chairs flying everywhere. I mean, it's a very up and down outlook, I think, on Coach Bob Knight, because he's so beloved by so many, but there's also a group that, you know, maybe wasn't the biggest fans of him. But I think everybody in a moment like this collectively comes together and realizes, Isaac, that we have lost a legend in the game of college basketball.
Yeah, that's all so well said, Jacob, because there is certainly a section of people, perhaps even those in our audience today, that are like, I detest that man because of things he did, choices he made, etc., the way he treated players. And I think even in death, we have to be able to recognize that, while also, as you said, this is a moment to just honor a person's life. Because, hey, brother, hand up, right? Like, who among us has not made mistakes that we wish we could take back in life? Who among us does not have moments that were not our best or prettiest? And Coach Knight obviously would say the same of himself. But as you said, one of the absolute legend of our sport, head coach at Army from 1965 to 71. And then obviously what everyone knows him for, being the legendary head coach at Indiana from 1971 to 2000, where he won 3 NCAA championships, went to 5 Final Fours, 11 times the Big Ten regular season champion. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And then obviously the twilight of his career, where he went down to Lubbock, Texas, and was the head coach there from 2001 to 2008. And so, Jacob, on the Indiana side of things, I mean, goodness. So, folks, for your just behind the curtain, we're just recording this a couple hours after the news broke. And so there's not been too much time to unpack thoughts or much of that. But Jacob, on the Indiana side of things, what is kind of some of the response you've already heard, either from fans or others, as people begin to mourn this loss and celebrate Coach's life?
Well, as you would imagine, Indiana fans they're devastated, right? Because of a coach that brought so much to the Indiana program back in his day, which was a completely different era of Indiana basketball and of college basketball. But whether it's a fan who's 10 years old, a fan that's 40 years old, or a fan that's 70 years old of Indiana basketball, as I mentioned before, everybody knows what he did for this program. And so everybody's just really, really hurt right now. And the women's team actually had an exhibition on tonight, on the day that he passed, and they had a moment of silence. I know that was extremely tough to be in Assembly Hall when this news broke, when the women's team was warming up. I mean, getting ready for an exhibition game. I mean, that just has to be really, really tough. And we've seen such great response from not just Indiana fans, but from tons of programs around college basketball, big name head coaches, big name programs. The one that stood out to me was Purdue. They had an event going on at their arena tonight, and they stopped progress, and had a moment of silence for the late Bob Knight. And that just really speaks volumes to me, because we know all basketball fans and Big Ten fans, and of course IU fans, know the rivalry and the hatred of Indiana and Purdue. But it's in times like this where you separate all of that, you look past all of that, and realize what happened here. And I mean, we've seen multiple head coaches come out and say things like Coach K and Coach Cal, and I know we've got those and want to read some of those. But yeah, it's a sad day for Indiana fans and for college basketball fans, man. It really is a tough thing for us to sit here and talk about, and really just a tough topic for everybody to be taking in right now.
That's well said, Jake. Well, why don't we go there? Let's share with folks some of those comments that are coming out from some of the famed coaches. I loved what Coach K said. Why don't you share that first, and Coach Woodson's as well?
Yeah, Coach K, of course, has a special relationship with Bob Knight, and he said, quote, "We lost one of the greatest coaches in the history of basketball today. Clearly, he was one of a kind. Coach Knight recruited me, mentored me, and had a profound impact on my career and in my life. This is a tremendous loss for our sport, and our family is deeply saddened by his passing." Coach K went on to say in a statement that he released, "We offer our sincerest condolences to Karen, Tim, Pat, and their families during this difficult time." Again, from Coach K, who played under Bob Knight at Army. And you know, the Coach K goes down in the record books, just like Bob Knight is one of the best coaches ever in college basketball. And it really is crazy how their paths crossed in different eras and in different times. And so really just a passionate statement there from Coach K. And you also had current Indiana basketball coach Mike Woodson, who released a statement and had some quotes. He said, quote, "It is profoundly a sad day for all of those and all of us who loved Coach Knight." He said, "My thoughts and prayers go out to his wife, Karen, his family, and to all of those who loved him." He said, "I'm so blessed that he saw something in me as a basketball player. He influenced my life in ways I could never repay. As he did with all of his players, he always challenged me to get the most out of myself as a player and, more importantly, as a person," is what head coach Mike Woodson said from Indiana.
I absolutely love it. I also really enjoyed it. I read what Coach Roy Williams said, and it's cool. I love to see these, because it's guys who, like, it's not the same coaching tree, didn't play under him, but was profoundly influenced. And so I loved what Coach Williams said, and he's put out this statement. "Coach Dean Smith was certainly my mentor, but the next guy for me was Bob Knight. I played golf with him, watched baseball with him, watched his practices my first year as a head coach, but more importantly, I appreciated the help he gave me in my coaching career. He acted like I was one of his guys and made me so much better. He was one of my heroes, and I will forever be grateful to him," end quote. There's a couple things there for me, Jacob, that I love. One of the things is that it really humanizes Coach Knight, just thinking about he and Coach Williams just out on the golf course together, sitting around in a golf cart, or, you know, just sitting around watching baseball together. Can you imagine watching a baseball game with Bobby Knight and the running commentary that he would probably like? Just super fun to think about stuff like that. But to think about, like, you know, the word I keep thinking of with him is enigmatic as a person. But we also have to remember that while that's so much of that public thing that people are trying to reckon with, he was somebody that really invested in and helped people. As Coach Williams said there, I appreciated the help he gave me in my coaching career. He talked about watching his practices his first year as a head coach, and just the fact that Coach Knight was willing to bring Coach Williams under his wing and make him so much better. Like, as you can read so much into just a paragraph like that about who he was. And Jacob, I believe you also had a quote from Coach Cal. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Coach Cal, current head coach for the Kentucky Wildcats, he tweeted out when the news happened, a little bit afterwards. He said, Bobby Knight, one of the greatest coaches of all time, has passed away. He said, I know his family and the Indiana family are hurting. All of us who love the game of basketball are hurting with them. Rest in peace, Coach Knight. And he also shared a photo about their unity dinner that they had last night. And just, it was a picture of the Olympic team that Coach Knight was the coach of.
Oh, wow.
And so just all of these big names currently in college basketball or just recently removed from the game of college basketball, how Bob Knight touched all of them, right? And had something to do with all of their success on coaches that all the ones we've named, Isaac, are going to go down in the Basketball Hall of Fame at some point. And so it just shows how impactful of a coach he was, what he did for the game of college basketball. But there are some things that, like you mentioned earlier, have turned people away from Bob Knight and his legacy and his time at Indiana and his time in the game because of the coach versus person argument. I think that comes up a lot of times when people start talking about head coach Bob Knight.
Yeah, and so, for like the Bloomington community, for the people around there as they reckon with this, do you feel like you more hear people discuss the negative side of it, or more the reverence for the coach and the success and those kind of things?
It's a good question. And I think personally, for me, in my interactions with other Hoosier fans, I think it's a little bit of both, but more people respect him and worship is the wrong word, but just look up to him because of what he did for Indiana basketball, especially the older generation of Indiana fans that grew up watching him coach this Indiana team. And they're just so thankful for what he did to this program. But it's very rare for any conversation before his passing here for a conversation to come up about Coach Bob Knight and something not come up about, practice issues or treatment of people issues and players. I mean, it's just, they go hand in hand, Isaac. And so I think Indiana fans talk more about his success and the legend of Bob Knight on the basketball court, but I think they go hand in hand when you have to bring up some of the things that he did and sort of the reputation that he built for himself.
And I also want to give, like, hear me not condoning any of the negative things that happened, but we do need to recognize that this was a different time in the world and in life. And it is hard to adjust to some of those things. Like I was having a conversation, actually. So for those who aren't aware, I'm also the host of Locked On Tar Heels. I was actually having a conversation with a former North Carolina player earlier tonight. And we were talking about this and just talking about how difficult it would have been for Coach Knight in this era, having to do things with transfer portal and keeping players happy. And, we've seen all these guys step away from the game. I mean, multiple guys whose quotes we've had tonight,
right?
Coach K, Coach Williams, Coach Wright from Villanova, all these guys have kind of gotten out of it kind of because of that. And so, there is that aspect of like the old guard, the old heads kind of thing that just doesn't fly anymore. And so you almost have to contextualize the era in which he coached and grew up, the Army training that's in his background. Like all of that is part of this that we would be remiss not to mention.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I mean, his era of just living day-to-day life was completely different than what we're living now in late 2023 as we push for 2024. And that it's just, you can see that in sports today, whether it be basketball or football at any level, right? It's just a different time. But all of the things that I guess the negatives, if you will, that people like to bring up about Bob Knight, whether it be the chair throwing incident or allegedly choking a player out in practice. I mean, these types of things that have happened and been told in these stories, they all happened, in my opinion, Isaac, out of just the sheer passion and want to win basketball games. I mean, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to win and win at the highest level. And he was a guy and a coach that believed in his way. It was his way or the highway, as they like to say, but he believed in his game plan and he believed that it could work. And it did. I mean, he won 3 national championships and 5 Final Fours. So it did work. And He, at times, maybe got a little overboard on some things, but when you're so passionate about something, especially in sports, and you're playing to win at the highest level like Bob Knight was at Indiana, things tend to happen. And I'm not, again, not saying that some of the things that happen are good, but are excusable by any means, but it came from a good place, I think. And he was a guy that when you hear former players and former coaches talk about him, he did care about them as a person and he loved them and wanted the best for them. But again, he ultimately wanted to win basketball games and win national championships. And I think that's where a lot of that came from.
And to this day, I mean, you talked about that it worked. I mean, to this day, we still have not had another undefeated team in college basketball since the 1975-76 Hoosiers team, which every year it's kind of like that Dolphins team, you know, popping bubbly when the last undefeated team loses. Jacob, something that was always interesting to me towards, you know, I mean, I guess it has been several years now, but Coach Knight as a commentator with ESPN was always interesting to me just because the opportunity, I mean, he was his usual gruff self and all that stuff, but his knowledge of the game, he's one of those guys where you say he's forgotten more than I ever knew about basketball. And I just appreciated getting to hear from him in that context of being a color commentator, helping me see the game in new and different ways that I might not have. And so I think for a generation of people that didn't get to see Bob Knight, the coach, I'm hopeful that they got to hear him as Bob Knight, the commentator, to just feel that passion that you were just talking about for this game that we all love.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I mean, I didn't get in until he in his late years when I was still a very young kid. I mean, I've gone back and of course watched highlights and things, but I wasn't around when he was coaching originally at Indiana. And so, yeah, getting to listen to some of his commentary that I've gone back and listened to as well, he is just so and was so knowledgeable about the game of college basketball. And again, Isaac, it goes back to those names that we brought up just a few minutes ago that have used what he taught them to become Hall of Famers themselves. And so I think that really does show just how knowledgeable, smart, and just over the top he was when it came to college basketball in a good way, because he was so ahead of his time and just knew a lot more than we did. There's no doubt about that.
There's also an aspect of, you know, Coach Knight has been sick for a very long time. No, at least at this point, no specific cause of death has been given from what I've been able to find. But we know that Coach Knight suffered from dementia in these recent years, that he's been in bad health for years. And so there is that aspect of like, you know, praise God that his suffering is now over, that his physical pain on earth is done and gone. And while that is obviously such a sad reality for his family, and I don't know that we've said it, so let me be sure to now, all our thoughts and prayers go out to the Knight family and loved ones and friends. But they also, there has to be a level and element for them of, oh, there's relief that he doesn't have to go through that anymore, because we all hate to see when loved ones in our lives just experience a physical earthly pain that they cannot escape from. And so from that aspect, that, you know, you hate to say, you don't want to say good news, but you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, we can never truly put ourselves in that situation of how the family is dealing or was dealing with it and is currently dealing with his passing. But that tends to be, you know, a common response when there's a long-term illness happening with an older family member, and maybe a little bit of a weight is lifted, and more so because of, like you mentioned, the pain is gone, and hopefully, you know, he can be in peace now. And so, yeah, it really is just a sad situation. You try to find some sort of light in the whole thing, and I think that's what this episode is about, Isaac. Is just talking about the legend of Bob Knight, the coach, the legend of him as a person, and the impact that he left on everybody in Bloomington, every IU fan in the country and around the world, and college basketball fans everywhere.
I think that's a great note to end on, Jacob, because that's so well said. I think the thing that Coach Knight would want us to do is he's like, y'all, stop worrying about me. Go enjoy the game that I loved. And how almost weirdly appropriate it is that Coach Knight dies 5 days before the start of the college basketball season. And so undoubtedly on Monday, as we all turn our attention to the tip-off of the season, the minds and hearts and thoughts of everyone around the country will be with Coach Knight, with the Indiana family, the Army family, the Texas Tech family, of course, as well. But I would imagine that Coach Woodson and the program is going to have some neat ways to honor and remember Coach's legacy throughout this season. And I'm really interested and curious to see what that'll be going forward.
Yep, Indiana opens up on Tuesday against Florida Gulf Coast. They have an exhibition actually on Friday coming up this week, and so they have that one. And then, yes, their season opener is against Florida Gulf Coast, and I'm sure it'll be a season-long honoring of Bob Knight, because there's just not enough time right now to honor him. And I mean, you could pick a different thing every time and honor him in every single game if you wanted to, and it would still be appropriate. So yeah, really, really interested on what Indiana, the school, and the basketball program do to honor him. And it's going to be an emotional couple of games to get going in the basketball season, especially there in Assembly Hall.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, again, it's great to get to be together for the first time that we join again. Hate that it's under these circumstances. Better this. To be able to honor Coach's legacy. And then obviously we look forward soon to being able to talk some basketball together. I know you're going to knock it out of the park as you continue to cover this story and then begin your first season covering the Hoosiers for the Locked On Network. Brother, it's great to have you as part of our team.
Thanks so much, Isaac. I appreciate it. And next time we'll get together and talk some games going on, talk some action as the season gets underway. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to being part of the Locked On Network and getting to know great people like you.
Yes, sir. Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been great to be together. Would love to hear your stories. Would love to hear your thoughts and recollections. So for those of you watching, share those with us here in the comments. I know that for Locked On College Basketball, we have a Discord community where you can hop in to that. The link to that is in the show notes, and we'd love to hear your Bob Knight stories in there as well. Make sure to follow both of our shows to check out great content, both about the Hoosiers and college basketball in general. We will be right back with you on Friday for more great content from both of these programs, Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Hoosiers. But until then, thanks for tuning in. Peace out.